Study Section 15. Nigeria's Foreign Policy during the Yar'Adua-Jonathan Administration. Introduction. In this study section, focuses on the foreign policy of the Yar'Adua and Jonathan administrations. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this study section, you should be able to 1. Highlight the basic feature of the Nigerian's foreign policy under the Yar'Adua. 2. Point out the foreign policy successes of Jonathan administration. Features of foreign policy during the Yar'Adua-Goodluck's administration. The government that succeeded Obasanjo on May 29, 2007, headed by Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, was widely seen as a continuation of the Obasanjo's regime, given the role Obasanjo played in the emergence of the government that succeeded him. In his inaugural speech on May 29, 2007, President Yar'Adua acknowledged that President Obasanjo's administration laid the foundation upon which Nigeria's future prosperity could be built. Although no fundamental change in the content of Nigeria's foreign policy was announced, President Yar'Adua fashioned a foreign policy trust for Nigerian called Citizens Diplomacy or Diplomacy of Consequences. Citizen diplomacy, as a foreign minister, Mr. Ojomadueke, defined it, entailed defending the legitimate interests of Nigerians wherever and whenever such interests were under threat or outright jeopardy. Indeed, at the time it was enunciated, the policy seemed most propitious given the increasing harassment of Nigerians across the world. The new foreign policy as unfolded by the Minister of Foreign Affairs was geared towards protecting the image and integrity of Nigeria and retaliate against countries who are hostile and who brand Nigerians as corrupt. In support of this position, the minister explained that the foreign policy focus is going to be a citizen-centered foreign policy. That is how it was beneficial to Nigeria and Nigerians. He added that the foreign policy thrust was a way of strengthening Nigerians' commitment to Africa and telling the good story about Nigeria. In a nutshell, citizen diplomacy required the government of Nigeria to more consciously resort to the calculi of the basic needs, human rights, and socio-economic welfare of the citizen in conducting bilateral and multilateral engagement with other nations. President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua further underscored the immediate foreign policy challenges facing Nigeria when he inaugurated a 6-member honorary Presidential Advisory Council on International Relations headed by the former Commonwealth Secretary General and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Chief Emeka Anyaoku, in 2009. The President charged the Council to lead the vanguard to reinvigorate Nigeria's foreign policy process in the light of the prevailing realities in today's increasingly complex world. It was also charged with the odious responsibility of assisting to position Nigeria as a highly respected member of the international community, a leading voice for Africa, and a champion of the interest of the South-South nations. The Council's terms of reference included 1. Advising from time to time on Nigeria's membership role in regional and international organizations. 2. Review and advising on foreign policy dimension of the 7-point agenda. 3. To review and advise on the effectiveness of Nigeria's diplomatic missions abroad in the promotion of the nation's interest. 4. To advise on the reform and retooling of foreign policy institutions. 5. And to advise on any other matter relating to Nigerian foreign relations that may be assigned to the Council or which the Council deemed necessary. According to the President, some of the immediate challenges of the nation's foreign policy strategy included its involvement in peacemaking and peacekeeping in troubled and conflicting areas of the continent, advancing Nigeria's and Africa's role and stature in the United Nations and other international organizations, and promoting cooperation with the West African region and effecting productive collaboration with Nigeria's neighbors in the Gulf of Guinea. The President's 7-point agenda to transform Nigeria was namely 1. Power and energy, 2. Food security and agriculture, 3. Wealth creation and employment, 4. Mass transportation, 5. Land reform, 6. Security and 7. Qualitative and functional education. The two additional special interest issues are the Niger Delta and disadvantaged groups. These were key areas that could transform any nation and provide a guideline for Nigeria to succeed in a globalizing world. Citizen diplomacy proceeds from the recognition that foreign policy could no longer exist independent of domestic policy. Its basic assumption was that foreign policy should be the external dimensions of the conscientious quest for the welfare of the citizen, whilst the basic needs of the citizen would be the rationale and justification for foreign policy engagement by the government. The proposition of citizen diplomacy was that Nigeria should and had the capacity to promote the welfare and rights of its citizens through its foreign relations. The Information and Communications Ministry, under the leadership of Professor Dora Akunyili, also instituted a home-based rebranding Nigeria project which was aimed at improving the image of Nigeria and raising a patriotic spirit in Nigerians at home by selling logo and slogan to them. The minister's strategy was a rebranding that began with making Nigerians change the way they see and think of their country. This approach aimed at uprooting the pandemic of negativism that afflicted all Nigerians and aroused Nigerians' dormant, passionate patriotism. There were clear indicators that Nigeria's status as a regional power had lost some teeth in the period under review. Nigeria's non-invitation to the July 2009 G20 summit, Obama's choice of Ghana on his first visit to West Africa as the first African-American president of the USA in July 2009, and Nigeria's silence on the crisis in Darfur and Zimbabwe, and a huge human, financial and political investment in West Africa, especially in Sierra Leone and Liberia. Features of foreign policy during the Jonathan Sambo era. Yar'Adua's foreign policy direction and strategy remained hazy up to his controversial sick leave and eventual death. This development paved way for Goodluck Jonathan to rise from the post of vice president first to acting president and then to substantive president, with Sambo rising from governor to vice president. The duo continued the mandate and policies of Yar'Adua. Armed with a new and direct mandate from Nigerians on May 29, 2011, the administration has come up with a transformation agenda still not different from the 7-point agenda. However, the Nigerian foreign policy is now anchored on the achievement of the Vision 2020. The vision provides a roadmap for Nigeria's foreign policy as a means of achieving economic growth and enhancing Nigeria's global competitiveness, with the target of placing Nigeria as one of the top 20 leading economies by the year 2020. According to the Vision 2020, by 2020, Nigeria will be one of the 20 largest economies in the world, able to consolidate its leadership role in Africa and establish itself as a significant player in the global economic and political arena. The vision, like the policy of economic diplomacy, places emphasis on using foreign policy to attract investment into the country. However, the proponents of the vision have promised that it will be different from the previous dispensation of economic diplomacy, which floundered because issues of bad governance, poor economic management, and high cost of doing business were not tackled, making the country unattractive to foreign investors. To the extent that foreign policy is a projection of the internal dynamics of the nation, growing the economy to provide jobs, tackling the corruption, providing infrastructures, and meeting security challenges at home is sine qua non for the success of the new foreign policy approach. The new regime understands that the world in the 21st century has changed from what it was in the 20th century, when the country's foreign policy was underpinned by the guiding principle of Africa, especially Nigeria's immediate neighborhood, being the focus of diplomatic attention. So, Nigeria cannot afford to stick to the old approach to our foreign policy. The world in the last 20 years has witnessed the rise of emerging economies, notably Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, BRICS, with phenomenal economic growth rate and playing an increasingly influential role in global affairs. Not surprisingly, The traditional great and superpowers have recognized these great potentials by constituting a group of G20 states to accommodate emerging economies. This global opening for emerging economies provides a window of opportunity for Nigeria to diversify our external relations and realize our potential greatness. Study session summary. In this study session, you learn that Yar'Adua has adopted citizenship diplomacy principle in the foreign policy. However, Yar'Adua's aversion to publicity and sluggish approach contrasted sharply with the desired leadership for Nigeria's continued prominence in Africa and in the world. The challenge before his successor, President Goodluck Jonathan, is how to translate the Vision 2020 into reality by setting Nigeria on the path of growth and global competitiveness. This is the end of post 566. Thanks for listening.